So I have a bunch of conflicting desires, and I suppose recently I've been working on this problem, on the problems that we're talking about here for quite a long time, probably for 10 years, not as long as sustainability has. That's reduced to a single question, I suppose. Recently we've managed to bring it down to a single question in terms of our understanding of the question, which is how can you make growth sustainable? And I think that's a problem that's occupying a lot of people in different ways. We've been working across different sectors with businesses, with governments and so forth, and it seems in different ways for different reasons a lot of people feel that question is quite important. Obviously businesses want growth, everybody wants sustainability, but at the moment these things they're not aligned, right? And if we come to meetings like this, and I don't mean to be down on this, but year after year, and we come back year after year and say, well, perhaps we'll change it this time, and we haven't. There's an interesting question about something's missing, right? Something's missing that's stopping all these problems from getting solved. So we've looked at this and come, I suppose, to a position where a lot of the solution now seems to be about bringing people together, and that's something that the internet, the digital, is clearly enabling. A lot of the activity that's going on across industries now is enabling togetherness to happen in the way that we've already been talking about this morning, at different scales as well. So part of the question we've been really looking at very closely is how can we enable people to collaborate at different scales. So that might be kids and their teachers, kids and their parents. It could be governments and industries, cities and countries. But most importantly, one of the things we found is it's peers. How can you get peer groups to collaborate together in ways that are really relevant to them and the desires and the concerns that they have? And design is in the title of this talk, and I wanted just in the setup to explain why that's there. Design is really, it's one of the tools that we use. CarbonCulture is a mixed up group of people. We're designers, but also scientists and technologists, software developers. But design is an interesting set of tools that treats problems as exciting. And it's interesting kind of across different bits of the world. Some people see problems really as things you don't really want to deal with too much. But designers talk about problems in the same way that surfers talk about waves or climbers talk about mountains. There's something that with a really hard one you can just conquer is fantastically exciting. And the problem of making growth sustainable is precisely in that space. It's clearly a really hard problem. Lots of people are trying to do it, and we haven't got the answer yet. And just on design, it's interesting that 50 years ago, Ken Garland and a bunch of others published this manifesto, which suggested at a time when design wasn't that powerful, it was just kind of billboards and posters that designers were making at that point. It was still changing society. It was changing the way that we were behaving. It was changing the way we were buying things, what we wanted for ourselves, from our lives, for our children. And now, of course, design is so much more powerful. If you look at the forces that are changing the world in terms of consumerism, in terms of product acquisitions, product choices, and lifestyle choices, a lot of them are driven by design. So that's kind of why design made it into the leading of the thinking here. So CarbonCulture is essentially we're seeking to answer the question: how can we help different groups of people at different scales, whether it's people and families, or whether it's cities, urban areas, staff in businesses, customers, to collaborate things that they find really valuable that have sustainability outcomes. And what we found on our travels, which I'm just about to start telling you about, is that across sectors, there's an enormous amount of demand for doing that kind of thing. In the public sector, obviously, public sector are interested in creating sustainability outcomes in ways that businesses can make money out of. Businesses are really interested in finding novel competitive advantage. There's an enormous amount of demand for making things better. Everybody inside businesses wants to do that, but it's kind of a question of finding a way of making those things happen. And that's kind of where a lot of the challenges prove to be. So we started out looking at this problem, wondering how we could use digital, how we could use technology inside organizations to enable organizations and the people within them to start making those changes. Started working with central government. DEC, the Department of Energy and Climate Change in the UK, were our first customer, and they gave us permission to build a social gaming platform that we could deploy to their staff, and they gave us audience of 1,000 civil servants to start working with. And since then, a number of other organisations have come on board, and we're working with all of them now to get them joining up their practices and working together. The kinds of things that you start with when you first start working with people on energy and carbon, on sustainability, behaviour change, and this kind of happens to everyone when they start working on the stuff, is to show them data and see what impact that will have. We built a technology infrastructure to pull in data from all kinds of different sources, the same kinds that Darryl was talking about earlier, and to aggregate data from all different sources and show people what that data means. If you hang that up in the lobby, there's an expectation, a widespread expectation, that will spontaneously change behaviour. That obviously doesn't happen, but it's nevertheless a really key part of the solution. We found with this type of interface, which was the first app that we built, we were able to get a 10% gas saving in about a fortnight, so that's very powerful, but it came through the experts rather than the non-experts. This kind of interface doesn't get non-experts interested in sustainability. So we built this social gaming platform, just a bit of a big leap there, which allows an enormous number of different kinds of intervention, not just the ones that are exciting to geeky kind of data-obsessed people, but people who, ordinary consumer type people or citizen type people who are interested in what they might do on the weekend or in their children's futures and so forth. And these apps up here, these are different kinds of interventions. Some are about comfort, some are about fitness, some are about fun, some are about profit, and individual people can choose the interventions that they would find interesting, and we're designing them so that they have a sustainability outcome. One good example here is Scrunch. Gets people to sit together in a workplace in the evening. When they do that, there's a potential energy saving of about 5%, 3 to 5% of the electricity demand. At the same time, they get a more productive and enjoyable workspace in the evening. We found it's really important as well. Can you see them? Quite difficult to see. We found it's really important to use humour in this stuff and cuteness. One really key finding in organisations was that there's lots of kind of invisible battles going on, lots of people fighting each other. We found people who are very clever, sophisticated people who are tricking the temperature sensors in their buildings to kind of make the building behave in ways that it's not meant to. And other people who are kind of tricking the light sensors. And these are very senior executives playing games with the systems in their businesses. We found as well that a lot of the data, the source data that's coming, as we've said before, from lots of different source systems, and we integrate all of that, a lot of it's wrong, and until you actually present it and make it public, start opening that up, there's not much reason to make it right. But as you go through this process of integrating everything and putting it on show, there's an opportunity not just to correct your data, but also through transparency, sometimes through radical transparency, to become much better, much more transparent organizations and actually turn that into benefits. So many businesses are finding now that when they publish some of their practices, they're able to be more who they want to be than they were able to be before. This is an example of another kind of display that we made onto the energy and carbon data that we've used. This was a while ago now, and is an example of how by making information visible in a way that's actually appealing to the audiences who are walking past it, and this is designed for a kind of passerby audience in London, you can really get their attention much better. And we found that kids were dragging parents up to this to get them to explain. This is actually solar data that's falling down here as kind of pixel rain. When there's more sunlight, you get more rainfall, and when there's less, there's less. And it's a very explanatory way of bringing that through. So we made a bunch of different interventions, each one of which was focused to a different audience. So the individual audiences, each of them have interest. By working with them in the design process, working with the users and asking them what they're interested in, whether it's a fitness outcome, a fun outcome, something that might help them to do their job more easily, something that might help them to book travel or be more comfortable. We can get something that really meets their needs, but also delivers a business outcome, which might be a savings outcome, sustainability outcome at the same time. By allowing them to choose the intervention they want to engage with, you can actually reach many more people than you otherwise could. We found in using this approach, we're able to get on a digital launch and an internal comms campaign 40% initial uptake from the entire population, which is unusually high with 20% repeat use, and deliver, as I said, a 10% gas saving in about a couple of weeks. So the approach here with a very small pilot was actually extremely successful. What we're looking to do now is find a way of deploying that more widely. So having piloted it now in a few government departments, we're just beginning, actually last week started building the first third-party app for the platform. And the design that we have is to deploy applications on the platform from a particular business, from a brand or from a government department, and then give those across the network to everybody else. So when an individual business figures out a really powerful way for them to save energy and carbon, instead of them keeping that to themselves, they're able at extremely low cost to distribute that across a community of their peers so that they can all save energy and carbon in a measurable way, and they can then share not just insights in the form of case studies, but actual performance enhancing tools, very low cost. This was some of the user feedback we had. At the beginning, it's very difficult to get quantitative outcomes about everything, but we did get some quant, as I told you about before. And we certainly found some very enthusiastic users, all of whom were extremely disappointed at the time the pilot ended. And I suggested, I'm going to have to run through this very quickly now, but I suggested that there's an opportunity for massive cost saving by deploying savings over and over again in a way that has very low cost of implementation, cost of distribution. We feel that there's a way of helping organizations that want leadership to lead in a way that's actually much more performative than simply doing a piece of leadership, publishing it, and then moving on to the next quarter. The last thing is just a note on transparency. We're based at the Open Data Institute in London, which is a very useful organization that I strongly recommend you to find out more about. There's a few equivalents around the world. We found out on open data, on transparency, there's a load of unexpected outcomes as well. When you do open your data to the public, as we have been doing in these cases, you get an enormous amount of help. We've had members of the public writing in asking government departments why their boilers were on a public holiday, which has led to improvements in boiler strategy. Obviously, most members of the public have other things to do, but there were some who were fascinated enough in the data to collaborate on that basis, and were it possible to make apps, which is where we're going to now, then they certainly would have collaborated in that. So what we found out, I suppose, is that by working together and by helping people to work together, each on the basis of their own interests, for businesses with their interest in making more money, in cutting costs, for government with their interest in public sector benefit, there are ways of putting together the different interests in such that we can get more out while putting less in. We're looking for other partners to join in. As I say, we've got 8 government departments joined in at the moment, a couple of universities, a couple of local authorities. If anybody is interested in doing stuff internally at the moment with staff, on staff engagement around energy and carbon, around sustainability engagement, embedding sustainability, then it would be wonderful to talk to you guys. Thank you very much.